Ladies and gentlemen, if I might have your attention. Good afternoon. Day 5, IPDET 2014. We're continuing, as Linda had announced yesterday, with a series of guest speakers to bring to you perspectives and ideas from people who help to shape the evaluation discipline from around the globe. And today, it is a great pleasure to introduce to you a German-Canadian or a Canadian-German. I'm not quite sure which way, but Caroline Heider here to my right has her origins in both Canada and in Germany. And she is currently the Senior Vice President of the Independent Evaluation Group in the World Bank. And prior to that, she held a number of senior positions in Rome and actually in Asia as well. Manila, yeah. So she's well-traveled, but that's really kind of irrelevant. She's smart. And, you know, we just bring you smart people. We don't mess with anybody who's not smart. So it's a Caroline Heider, Senior Vice President of the World Bank, Washington, D.C. She is helping to shape and define the evaluation agenda for the development community, and particularly for the bilaterals and the multilaterals from all over the world. And she came up to see us, and she is ready to make a presentation. So I would please ask you for a warm IPDET welcome for Caroline Heider.
Well, thank you very much, and I would like to encourage you, please do continue with your lunch and enjoy that. I will add some food for thought to that as you enjoy the meal. And at the end of the presentation, I will also give you some time for questions and answers. So I suggest you do the eating now so that you can ask a lot of questions at the end. The topic of my talk today is evaluation. What difference do we make? This is a very difficult question for many of us to answer. And you might wonder, well, why do we even ask that question? Isn't evaluation recognized to be a good thing by itself? It is true, especially I have worked in evaluation for more than 25 years. And in the beginning, it was very much, oh, evaluation will just tell us whether something succeeds or whether it fails, and therefore, we don't need to ask questions of it. We are now arriving in a place where people are asking more and more the question, so after the evaluation, what happens next? What influence do you have, and what changes as a result of it? As we get asked this question, very often the reaction is, well, how could we know at the beginning of an evaluation what difference we're going to make? We don't know what we'll find. We know that some of the stakeholders will be very reluctant and resistant, and we actually don't have any power over them because we evaluate, we issue the results, but then they have to take things forward. There are many stakeholders and factors that play a role. It's not just that we have one person that we interact with. There is a whole group of people that would have to play ball. It's a bit like the soccer games, right? Now, one thing that if you take off the evaluation hat and really sort of think about this dilemma, it's the same dilemma that people on the development professional side have. When they design a project, whether it's a policy reform project, it's a project to build irrigation systems or to promote better education, they face actually exactly the same problems. And we evaluators ask that question, how effective were you? What difference did you make with your project? So the time has come where we have to think about that for ourselves as well. So how do we go about this? And I'll sort of talk about basically 3 points, 3 ingredients, and then I'll open up for questions and answers. And obviously, you might have a lot of ideas about what makes a difference, what contributes, that you would have examples from your own practice, because I understand that many of you are evaluation practitioners or have interacted with evaluators, so you would have some first-hand exposure. So there are 3 things. One is think about influence from the start. The second is knowing your stakeholders and know with whom you interact. And the third one is, just like what we say to the development practitioners, measure your success. Think about how will you assess whether your evaluation has an influence. So let me start from the top, thinking about influence from the start to finish. So as we design an evaluation, and I'm sure that Ray and Linda are talking about how you think about which methodologies to choose, how to frame the scope of an evaluation, they probably also talk about that we should be setting out an objective for the evaluation. And in my practice, I've seen a lot of evaluation design papers, and we all have gotten to a comfortable place to talk about the objective of the evaluation is accountability and learning. Maybe we will talk about some policy process that we want to influence, but our own objectives are set quite generally. So what I would encourage you to do is to think in a more clearer way or a focused way. How would you set that objective for this particular, very specific evaluation you are working on? Thinking about which processes do you want to influence, who are the decision makers that should be learning from this evaluation, and what should they be taking away from what you are producing? Because that will help you think about the scope of the evaluation questions, and how to also present it and interact with the stakeholders. Then during the evaluation, it's sort of like a short key phrase is deepen the dialogue. The more you know about the project or the policy that you're evaluating, the more you are going prepared into the conversation with the stakeholders, the more you can have actually an interaction and engagement about that project itself. Because you will come in and not ask the basic questions about how big is your project, how much has it cost, where is it located, but you will demonstrate to the stakeholder that you've understood already something about the project and you want to really discuss where the problems lie and how to find solutions to that. You have to do that keeping an open mind, but that's a very good thing to do during the evaluation. And then after the evaluation is sort of sharing the knowledge and understanding who needs to know what at what point in time. Unfortunately, many evaluations sort of like they take a life of their own and they're very busy and engaged, and then the evaluation is finished, and either there's very little dissemination, and I've worked in many institutions where the dissemination has been, there was no budget for it, so we would just issue the report and hope people would take it away and learn from it. In IEG, we're very fortunate. We have quite a bit of resources, but that also raises the expectations as to how we should be sharing knowledge. But the other important thing is, if you think from the beginning what processes you want to influence, there might be timelines that you want to be aware of. And so that you work towards and not have your evaluation just come out a month after that milestone event has happened, and everybody says like, oh, if I'd just known, if I'd just seen your evaluation earlier, I would have been happy to incorporate those findings. So that's really important to think about as you design your evaluation and carry it out. Think influence from start to finish. Know your stakeholders. Now, some people might think, oh, well, you know, we're independent, especially IEG, the Independent Evaluation Group, is very independent. I see a colleague from IFAD. It's a very independent evaluation office there. And so if we get too close to the stakeholders whose projects we evaluate, do we start being biased? I would argue it is actually the opposite. The better we understand stakeholders, the more we understand where they come from, what their concerns are, and what the problems are they are also seeking to solve, the more we can actually do an evaluation that grapples with the same issues, that can give an impartial and objective evaluation that will actually be forward-looking and help address some of the problems. So in addition, to do a good evaluation, an impartial one, you actually need to have an understanding of who all the stakeholders are. We very often focus on the stakeholders who are immediate, the people who manage the projects, the government officials. There are many more stakeholders out there, whether it is CSOs and NGOs, other institutions within the country, other ministries, and then international and bilateral organizations who play a role as well in this whole development effort. And so understanding who all these players are and what their stake is, what they have to gain and to lose from the project itself, as well as from the evaluation. So when you talk to them and they give you pieces of information, you can put that into perspective. You can understand, what does this mean? Why is this person telling me this? And if you've done your homework well, you might actually even know what they are not telling you, and you can ask further probing questions. The other part of this is knowing what they care about. It is important for you to, one, know what the hot button issues are. Evaluations can be very explosive, and sometimes they need to be to shake things up and make people react and say, like, okay, continuing business as usual is not the right way to go. But sometimes we trigger really strong reactions inadvertently, simply because we're not aware. Now, the better you understand the stakeholders, the more you understand what they are trying to do, you can be empathetic. And empathetic doesn't mean sympathetic, where you simply say, oh, you're doing a great job, but where you say, look, I care about what you care about. I want you to succeed. However, here are some things that you could do better. If you approach the evaluation profession in this way, you will make much bigger of a difference than when you come in and say, actually, I don't care about what you do, I'm looking for your mistakes, and I'm going to hit you over the head and make a public fool out of you. You see the difference in the practice? So in one case, yes, you are making a very strong statement about somebody having failed, but that person in all likelihood is not going to hear your lessons, and in all likelihood is not going to change. In the other case, you have a much better chance of making an influence, making an inroad, and making them do something different. The third dimension to this sort of knowing your stakeholders is also knowing yourself and knowing your power. There are some people who feel that we as evaluators have no power because we don't make any decisions about projects or whatever. And there are others who think, actually, we have a lot of power, and that when a bad evaluation comes out, funding stops and people get fired. Now, in my whole practice, I've actually not seen that happen. Quite often, if funding stops, the decision was taken beforehand, and then you do an evaluation to justify it, you know. But that fear is there. And so being mindful of that and exercising the power in ways that has a positive influence rather than the sort of more detrimental one when you approach evaluation as an inspector. And then measuring success. So here I want to talk a little bit about what we do in IEG as a vice presidency. We have this year for the first time actually developed a results framework for IEG overall. We set ourselves objectives. The larger one is to ensure the World Bank Group's development effectiveness is enhanced. The World Bank Group has set itself targets to eradicate poverty by 2030 and to boost shared prosperity. They've set set themselves an interim target for 2020, and we want to use evaluation to ensure that they use evidence to accelerate their progress in that direction. The second objective we've set ourselves is to look at the World Bank Group strategy. So together with the targets, there's a strategy that sort of talks about changes that the World Bank Group wants to make in order to achieve these targets more effectively and efficiently. And there are 3 initiatives. One is about country engagement, a second one is about finding solutions in a different way, and the third one is about partnership. And so we want to ensure that our evaluations look at these initiatives early on in the process in order to give early on feedback to the board and to management whether the initiatives are actually taking them anywhere in the right direction. So this is really measuring our results, but setting ourselves up so that it can be done. Otherwise, if we don't set ourselves objectives, if we don't set ourselves indicators for measuring it and have a measuring system in place, we will face the same problem that the projects have that we evaluate. The same thing can be done for a specific evaluation. When you set out and you have clearer objectives, again in IAG we have a tracking system where we observe what does management do as a follow-up to the evaluation recommendations. And we have occasionally done follow-up studies where we probe deeper into what difference did this really make. And that brings me back to the topic of the evaluation. So 3 key areas to think about when you want to have influential evaluations. Think influence from the start to the finish. Know and care about your stakeholders. Don't be corrupted by them. And then measure your own success. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
My name is Lâm Tất. I am from Cambodia. I work for a joint UN project on human trafficking. So I think this is a question people who always ask. I really agree with what you said, but you know, sometimes evaluation, to have a good evaluation, we need a lot of resources. So from your practice at the World Bank, what should be the proportion of the budget or the resources allocated for a program for the implementation of the evaluation? Thank you.
Let's take a couple.
Okay. Another question? Yes, please.
And then here in the front. This lady.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation and for sharing your experience with us. Very useful advices. My name is Sylvia. I'm from Moldova. And I'm wondering regarding the last point you mentioned. As an independent evaluator, can you please share our experience regarding the interaction with the local people? Because from my own experience, anytime when someone, it doesn't matter with what purpose come to our country, we try to be to show our hospitality, and we want to demonstrate this person how kind we are and how nice we are. So at what extent you as an external evaluation can interact in this non-official part of the collaboration? Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ana. I come from Mexico. I work for federal government. I thank you too for sharing your experience with us. And I don't have exactly a question, but a reflection on your point on the power of evaluators. Working in government, we have this preoccupation that every statement is well supported, because definitely there is a power, especially growing power from the side of academics, that is the attention to evaluations is increasing. And also one expects external evaluation to be impartial, independent, objective. So every statement that is written, it has a huge impact in public opinion, and in research. So it's something that from our work as evaluation units, we try to promote and balance, and it has been difficult to also communicate that in no way we want to influence the conclusions or the statements, but just to promote that are well supported.
Okay. Do you want to take those three?
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Starting with the first question about the resources and what the percentage is. We've had actually some discussions in the UN system. I used to be in the UN and part of the UN evaluation group, where we were trying to figure out what is adequacy of resources for evaluation. And budget and staff was sort of like one metric which we tried out. And we took stock of what does the landscape in the UN system look like, you know, how much, what's the percentage of the overall budget that goes to evaluation. The results were stunning in terms of diversity. I was at the World Food Program at the time, and we had 0.06% of the overall budget. There were others, which will remain unnamed, who had something like 3%. And so we decided that it's actually not a very easy metric. We ourselves in IEG have just recently done an expenditure review because we were looking for efficiency gains, and we did the comparison with the regional development banks evaluation offices and with IFAD. It's part of that group, which is called Evaluation Cooperation Group. And we came out as IEG also at the lower end of the spectrum, 0.9%. Some people feel 1% is ideal. My own sense is that we need to start moving into a discussion about coverage. What is it of the work that the development institution is doing that can be evaluated? And if the budget is such that there are major gaps being left, then we are too short of funding. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves, should we evaluate absolutely every single project? Because, you know, when you think of it, the World Bank Group, we have hundreds of projects. If we would evaluate each one of them individually, that would be quite a bit of resources. And we actually want to look at higher plane evaluations, looking at sectors, at strategies, at country programs, so that we get sort of the more collective view. So I know I'm not answering your question directly. If the project is very simple, you might need much less money. If it's a very complicated project, you will need more money. So, you know, having a fixed percentage may not actually be the right answer. You were asking about interaction with local people and how do we do this as evaluators. And I used to actually do the evaluations. Now I'm, you know, sitting in the office and doing other things, but we would go and do field visits. And when I was at the Asian Development Bank, I did, for example, an evaluation of what the Asian Development Bank did for poverty reduction. And in each of the 5 countries, I hired local teams, and they would go out and collect the data. Because, you know, as a foreigner, when we come and ask questions, we already sort of like start distorting things. When there is a translation question, you know, I mean, like when we worked in Laos, quite often it was from a local dialect, the translation needed to be done from that to Laotian to English. So you can imagine the Chinese whispers that happen in that context. So hiring local teams and having them work on the evaluation on an agreed methodology and agreed framework is a great way to go. It also builds a lot of ownership. One other really exciting example that I've been able to do, unfortunately only once, was a participatory evaluation. This was in Papua New Guinea, and we did that as a companion piece to a more traditional survey and focus group discussion. And in that case, we had somebody who was very good at participatory evaluations. He was giving training courses at that time. And he selected his team. There were 4 Papua New Guineans, 2 men, 2 women, because we needed to have people who could discuss with the different groups. And they went and were embedded in the community for 5 days and were observing how the community was working, and then at convenient times would have conversations about what were the big changes they had observed over the last 5 years. So instead of asking specifically, here is this coffee project that was helping you grow better coffee, was that actually a good idea? They were just sitting back and asking, what really, really concerns you? And they knew there was a coffee project. And then if that didn't come up, they would ask a question and say, well, how about that? What did that do anything for you? And what was very interesting about this is when we then put the survey results that took place in comparable villages, but not the same villages, together with this sort of very participatory approach, we could see the feedback from the survey would say, yes, this was good about the project, we liked this was not so effective, and so on. And then the other methodology said, you know, relatively speaking, our biggest problem is security. We can't take the coffee to the market. So even if we know how to grow coffee better, it doesn't make any difference because we get robbed either of the coffee on the way to the market or of the money on the way back. So, you know, even if we know how to grow better coffee and more coffee, we will always pick just a minimum amount and try to get to the market and get back home safely. So, you know, it puts the whole thing into a big different perspective of, you know, the relative importance of a project, you know, and that was a very exciting way to get to stakeholders and what difference we made for them and to them. And then let me react to Anna and the power of evaluation. And you've put really the point on some very, very important issues about impartiality and objectivity and the evidence base. And this is really essential. This is why you're here for this training course. So you learn the methods, that you know how to generate and produce high-quality evaluations, because poor quality evaluations can be damaging to the stakeholders, but also to the evaluation profession. The more evaluations that come out that are very loosely stated and don't really, you know, present the evidence to support their observations, you know, people, that is probably one reason why people are asking, what difference are you making? Are you really doing as good a job as you can? So that's very, very important, and thank you for raising that. Shall we have some more questions? We have.
My name is Boris. I'm also coming from Moldova. Regarding timing on preparing for evaluation, because it's a huge planning work, so if you can provide some appropriate timing when we should start thinking about evaluation, this is one. Second, it is also related to impartiality of the evaluation in terms of when somebody is preparing agenda for evaluator, including some visits, meetings, field trips, and so on. So this, it seems to be not very well impartial because it could be just one side view to that. How to avoid this? And my third question is related to importance of management response to the evaluation. Especially when management is certainly interested on good results of evaluation. Thank you.
Right here in front of you.
Hi. It's on. Hi, my name is Genesis. I'm from the Philippines. I work for the Department of Health. I love the title of your presentation, actually, because I think that is a pivotal thing that I'm sort of saddened about. It seems that the rigor in preparing for evaluations, the methods are so intense, but the dissemination is not as rigorous, or the preparation for the dissemination or making it useful. There's not so much planning in how to make the evaluation results useful and to the stakeholders and to the country or whatnot. So I guess my question is there some sort of way to measure that usefulness, and if countries or stakeholders actually do use the information, and that the information is not just in shelves or in like if you disseminate by a meeting, is that it? And the recommendations are never used anyway, because I want to believe that the point of the evaluation is to improve something, and if it's never used or very scarcely used, then I feel that the whole process was not maximized to its full potential. And my second question is, there seems to be a very big push towards more academic types of formats, and the Department of Health in the Philippines has been targeted perennially for releasing information in terms of PowerPoints or briefers, which does not seem to capture, is not the known format, and we've been always told that you don't release your evaluation results, and we are always we do, but it's not in huge 300-page documents, and so is there, are we moving towards the digital age and this whole dynamic of social media and all? Is there some move also in terms of formats of disseminating information and actually seeing use immediately versus writing 4 chapters of evaluation reports that are never used?
Is there anyone in the back? We've got 3 folks. No, that's not far enough back.
We'll come back to you.
We'll come back. No? No one in the back? Then the down here.
Thank you. My name is Sumi Baumann. I'm a German JPO with the World Food Programme.
Oh.
Yeah. And I would like to get back to the funding question, just because we're right now discussing in WFP to have a ring fencing system to set aside a certain percentage of our project budget for monitoring. But I think monitoring, as you know, will be very important for our evaluations in WFP. And I just want to hear your opinion on that and whether there's any experience from other agencies or organizations.
Shall we take the last question over there?
Thank you very, very much, Caroline, for that very beautiful presentation and the fact that evaluations have to be participatory and they should involve all stakeholders. My comment and my question relates to the national statistical systems. We know in the developing world, that's in the global south, the national statistical systems still have a lot of challenges, and I think they're very, very crucial partners as far as evaluations are concerned. I don't know how the World Bank Independent Evaluation Group collaborates with these national statistical systems, especially the coordinating offices that are the bureaus of statistics, so that whatever evaluation is done, the information will be captured within the national statistical system and will be used as baseline information for subsequent evaluation, so that we don't have to spend a lot of resources in trying to reinvent the wheel because the knowledge exists and the information is not being shared. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me start from the top. Timing in preparation for the evaluation, when to start. Boris, your question. Ideally, they should be thinking about it as they design the project. So from the beginning, there should be thought about what would be the indicators, how to evaluate it, what are the key milestones, when best to evaluate. Say if it was an innovative project that is trying different sort of things and having sort of more of a pilot sort of approach, then obviously you would want to build in interim evaluations that can be self-evaluations to sort out whether, this prototype worked and you want to continue or you want to tweak it, and another one might have been a failure and you take it out. And equally, then there should be thought about when there should be evaluation and how independent that evaluation needs to be. For preparing the evaluation itself, obviously you want to keep in mind what is going to be a big decision point. So, for example, if there is going to be a point in time where funding needs to be renewed, then you have to say, okay, what's the date for that, and then work backwards. And depending on the level of depth and thoroughness of the evaluation and the own processes, because there each institution can work faster or slower depending on, you know, bureaucracy and level of consultation and type of consultation, tricky issues that might come up in consultations, you want to plan it out from there. Very often there are sort of benchmarks. We know roughly how long it takes to do a project evaluation, so we can sort of take it and plan it that way. One thing that's really, really important, and when I was at the World Food Program, we introduced that there is a very thorough preparation for the evaluation. So one was the design itself was very thorough, but we put together all of the background information. We gave that to the consultants who we hired to do the evaluation. We had them in WFP headquarters for a week to brief them and have them have interactions with the other stakeholders so that once they went to the country to evaluate, they were really well prepared. So investing in preparation is very important. When somebody else prepares a trip, you know, are you meeting only stakeholders that they want you to meet? Now, that's exactly the reason why when you do your own stakeholder analysis, you can then say like, but wait a second, you know, what happened to these guys? Or, you know, there is a group of women that should be talked to. If you don't have that stakeholder analysis, you will be led by them, and that will be all it, you know. Now, there can be situations where you really can't talk to that stakeholder group, you know. Again, thinking back on my Manila days, we had once a field worker abducted by a group, you know, so you have to manage around that, and if somebody tells you don't go there, there could be a good reason, and it's not just hiding information. But that's special situations, you know. And then you had a question about the management response and how to deal with when they just want good evaluations. And I think that is something we all deal with. I mean, that's a very typical thing. You know, don't give us a bad record. We really believe this was a great project, and, you know, you need to acknowledge that, and so on and so forth. And that's where, you know, especially when you're not as independent as you need to be, you might get under a lot of pressure to change, you know, your assessment, change your ratings. My answer has always been that telling you that all is fine will not fix the problems. Because if everybody is complicit and doesn't raise the problems and doesn't say something has to change, the institution will never perform at its best. And once I had a very heated discussion with a country director who said, you know, you can't blame us for this is a systems error, and we need more time and whatever. And I gave her this answer, and she just completely stopped and became a huge supporter of evaluation. Sometimes people don't think it that way because they feel attacked. But if you turn it around and say, but it's in order to make your life easier, you can get a lot of leverage there. Now, there was a question from the Philippines about the sort of like usefulness of evaluations, and that so much gets invested into preparing and doing evaluations that we sometimes forget about. How do we disseminate? And certainly just having one workshop is not good enough, you know, and in IEG we're investing in developing these more modern internet-based sort of ways of capturing knowledge and making it more accessible. We do produce huge reports. Our evaluation reports are 350 pages. They're big like this. You know, if you pile up everything that we've done this year, it's about this high. Some people have crude jokes about that, but we recognize that if the knowledge disappears into very, very big documents and people can't find it, they will not act on it. So whether they like your message or not doesn't matter, because they haven't seen it and they can't find it. So using, whether it's PowerPoints, we are thinking, we had a very interesting workshop just about 10 days ago where we came up with the concept of an origami report, so which you can fold out and you can find information. And so depending on what your perspective is, what you're interested in, what the issues are. You can dig deeper and get more and more information and evidence, but it requires that the top-line messages are clear and simple and really grab the attention of people. And so that's one thing which we're going to pilot and try out. In terms of the usefulness and what's the measure, in IEG we've had a client survey that we've run for a couple of years. Now, client surveys are always very tricky with evaluation because quite often they might say, well, we didn't like that evaluation because it hurt too much, right? They wouldn't say that. They would just say the quality of the evaluation was bad. So that's why we've introduced now sort of more the metrics and indicators, some of which we are still working on defining. But we've also done sort of follow-up studies. So we are collecting examples where people have used our work, they reference it, or examples where we can show there has been a shift in the way certain things get designed, or one of my favorite examples from the World Food Program was we did a big evaluation on capacity development, after which then the guy who was leading the capacity development program organized the workshop, used all the concepts, convinced everybody that was the way to go, never gave us credit, and people came back afterwards and lectured me on that. I said, that is a good success criteria because they had understood. I don't know whether they've changed their practice, but at least they understood the concepts. And I talked about the academic formats already. And the fencing off the money for monitoring. This is a very old discussion in WFP. It existed already when I was there. For those of you who don't know the World Food Program, it delivers food assistance to people. It's entirely voluntarily funded. There is no budget they have for sure. So each initiative, they have to go around and get donor money. And a lot of the development practitioners, the humanitarians, they say, like, if I can use that money to feed some more people, why would I invest in monitoring? That's a really, really hard trade-off, especially when you're in an emergency situation where people are starving. At the same time, it's really important to monitor and understand whether you're actually reaching the right people, whether you're actually giving them the nutrition they need so that you're doing good and not harm. Is ring fencing the answer? It probably has to be, because otherwise the trade-off is never going to be made. It's a very tough choice to make, and then figuring out what the amount should be, what the percentage should be, is a very, very tricky one. So it's not an easy answer to provide there. And then we had a question about national statistics systems, and you're entirely right. They're really, really fundamental to helping evaluators get data and information. Now, in the World Bank Group, it's a very large institution that works across many, many different domains. And the president of the World Bank Group, Jim Kim, has committed to supporting national statistical capacity development, because he comes from a background, he's evidence-driven, and he sees the need for more information and more data. So it's going to be somebody else in the World Bank Group that's supporting that. And we, as IEG, are wanting to suggest that there should be a similar initiative to develop national evaluation capacities to go hand in hand. Because if you have the data but no analytical capacity, it's a bit of a shame that because you can't use the information as much as you should be. If you have evaluation capacity without the statistics, we will have more and more reports that say there is no data. And that may be also not a good approach. So they will go in hand, hopefully. More questions? Assuming we have time.
We have one here, one back there. Okay, please, over here and then back there.
And Ray.
Okay, I'm Pradeep from Switzerland, and I just joined IFAD IOE on a secondment 1 month ago. It seems to me that in the past years, accountability has been increasingly pressed upon all international organizations and development agencies. A lot. We have been, in Switzerland, have to report far more to the parliament. We've been criticized quite a bit in past years, and we see that, it seems to me, that trend overall. What I would like to have your views on what's happening at the level of governments in developing countries. Are you having the impression that their also accountability towards their citizens has increased a great deal in the past years, and also even in developing countries? Because my impression is that we are asked to account far more in development, but it's not all, the demands are not all that strong for other departments in our system, because development is much more put into question. Thank you.
So my question has to do with, we can design all the interventions or all the evaluations we want, but how do we manage beneficiaries that are exhausted of being evaluated, monitored, studied, and they just want programs, and they're called for meetings continuously? So how do we manage that? How do we manage that? What impact does that have on the data? Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There was another question in the far back there.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. My question is just following from what you've been talking about planning and making sure you have TORs for your evaluation, especially like for me, because in most cases I manage the evaluators, the consultancies. But what I have found is that, okay, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Rudo from Zimbabwe. So we are doing our country program evaluation, and we developed the TORs. But in most cases, what we do is that sometimes you are tempted to go on to the design methodology in the TORs, such that when you now advertise and people respond, sometimes there's just no creativity, no innovation. Whatever you would have said in your TORs is what is coming. So how do you balance whatever you give out in your TORs to the consultancies and be able to get something useful and some creativity in there? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other question? We had Boris here in the front once more. But anyone else? Okay.
Thank you for remembering my name. Two quick questions. One is advantages and disadvantages, especially for having joint national, international and national evaluation regarding impartiality of the evaluation. And second, I am working for UNFPA in Moldova. And now Moldova, it's so-called delivering as one country, probably knows this UN innovative approach. And there are no harmonization, still no harmonization between UN agency rules and procedures. But having this delivering as one approach, we must be accommodated to one UN standard, which is definitely is not working in place. So now I'm thinking when in 2016, so-called United Nations Partnership Framework will be evaluated in Moldova, what really will be the results, taking into consideration this non-harmonization inside of UN? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. So first question was from Pradeep on accountability, and that we as development practitioners are feeling that a lot more than others. Now, I've never evaluated any developed country. We were part of the OECD DAC evaluation network, and I know that they do look at their programs as well. But yes, the focus is much more on the development side rather than otherwise. So are we, are we calling too much for accountability and are people in what we call client countries, others call partner countries, they used to be called developing countries, are people there calling for accountability. And I think if you look around and see how people are more and more demanding good governance, I think so very much, that they are asking for accountability from their governments, whether it is through protests in Brazil, about the soccer, or rather the expenditures that happen in conjunction with that. But many other countries, this is happening too, There is an initiative that's called Eval Partners, and it brings together a number of international organizations, UN and bilaterals and so on, and they're promoting the establishment of voluntary organizations for professional evaluators in order to sort of like also create the professional capacities in the countries to advocate for evaluation and make evaluation happen in order to feed into policy making and decision making processes. So I think, yes, that's a rising trend. But from my perspective, there has been a lot of push also for the learning side from evaluation. It's not only about accountability. We cannot sort of get away with finishing our evaluation by saying, you set out these objectives, you achieved them, thank you very much, we go away. Or you set out these objectives, you didn't, too bad, you're really bad, and we go. No, this whole talk was about, so how do you learn from the evaluation so that the next project will be better? So the learning side, and for me, accountability and learning have always been this intertwined for evaluation. Beneficiaries being exhausted by evaluations, they're actually exhausted by everything. I was in Laos. Actually, I've been to Laos many times. It's a wonderful country. I really enjoyed it. And I remember my last visit, we went to an area that used to be much more remote. I remember going there at a time where, there was nobody. And we stopped in this village to do sort of like a bit of an interview. And at the same time, there was a car from the European Commission. I was with the World Food Program. And then we talked to them, and they said, we have so many projects going on, we have no time to work in our fields anymore. So when the most recent project came, we told them to go away and take another village. And so this is not just happening for evaluation, this is the development practice as well. And we seriously have to ask ourselves, participatory is great, but if we absorb more of people's time and resources, we're not doing good for them, and so that's something very important to keep in mind. I don't have an easy answer. I don't have a simple answer of how to address this problem, leave alone fix it. It's something where we have to ask ourselves some serious questions. There was a question in the back, the lady from Zimbabwe. How to manage this sort of planning of the evaluation and writing the TOR so that you get actually the most from your consultants. And again, in WFP, we contracted out all of our evaluations. In IEG, we do them all by staff, so very, very different models. What we did in WFP is we had a very clear set of providing the right background and framing the questions, but not, and saying something about methodology and how we wanted to make sure that they came up with methodologies that were robust and really had all the checks and balances. And then the consultants had to prepare what we called an inception report, in which they explained how they would take the terms of reference and translate that into an actual evaluation. And so maybe you need to sort of like look at your TOR. Are you mapping out all of the methods in detail, and whether you need to sort of like more set out the principles and the expectations you have, rather than say you should be doing a survey, you should be doing focus groups. And so that could help. One thing which we also did at WFP, because we had long-term agreements with consulting companies, and so after a year we sat down with them and said, like, give us feedback. How is it to work with us? And we'll give you feedback about how we like working with you, what's working, what's not working, you know. Or in one case, they had cut and paste an evaluation matrix from one to another evaluation. We did tell them that much earlier than after the 1 year. You know, they changed the name of the country, but they missed out on the capital. That was a bit embarrassing. So, so small tricks that you can use. But it's really to think about the differentiation between the manager of the evaluation and your role and the actual evaluator. We formalize quite a lot of that in our evaluation quality assurance system in WFP. Advantages and disadvantages to having joined teams. I gave you the example when I was at ADB and I commissioned national people to go around and collect data. They had a tremendous comparative advantage doing that. And I picked people from research institutions, universities, companies, independent companies who were commissioned to do that work. I have worked previously at one point when I was with the UN Industrial Development Organization, a long time ago. We had a tripartite agreement where UNDP, who was funding the project, UNIDO, who was doing the technical side of the project, and the government were supposed to have evaluators on the team. Quite often the national evaluator was there observing, not asking questions, not participating fully. But we're talking about early 90s, so this is a very long time ago. The risk that everybody faces in this situation is that the person who comes from a national context will be subject to a lot more pressure. So depending on how high the stakes are, and that's again where your stakeholder analysis comes in, when you understand what are the stakes, how high are they, how much pressure could result, where is the pressure coming from, you also then know if this person comes from a certain context, whether they would be implicated in this or how much they can withstand the pressure. I emphasize always why it's so important, because they add local knowledge and local understanding. They have sometimes access to information we as expats don't have. And so that's why I think it's worthwhile trying to overcome those limitations to independence. It is also a way of developing capacity. The more people learn through the experience, the stronger their expertise becomes. Obviously, the international part of the team brings more of an international perspective, knows what's happening in other countries, adds sort of like more of that knowledge to it, quite often has very high standards on technical abilities that would be different and add to the local team, and have the evaluation experience and expertise and bring that, and be more independent, assuming that they come from an independent evaluation office as well. And then the big question about delivering as one. Yes, this is a program I'm well familiar with, because it started some years ago when I was still with the World Food Programme. And it's going to be very difficult to assess that, because while the intention is there that the UN system should work as a system and as one, the actual implementation and translating that into practice on the ground is very, very hard. And you mentioned already the standards are not the same, the metrics are not the same. There are huge questions around how that can work. And I'm not involved in that since I joined IEG, which is almost 3 years ago, and I don't know exactly how they will overcome that, but it's very, very tricky. In WFP, we did an evaluation of partnerships, so that's sort of like something where you can look at what's the cost of partnering, how does that work. At IEG, we evaluate global partnership programs, but they're set up under one umbrella as a partnership program. Here we're talking about many different institutions that are trying to come around a common program, common goals, and that's very, very hard.
I think we have to give a very round of applause. Thank you, Caroline.